So without further ado, it is my pleasure to welcome Kristin Wright, who is the Director of Special Education at the California Department of Education. It is wonderful to have her here. I'm going to turn the mic over to you.
Thank you. And it'll be my pleasure to introduce your next speaker. But before I do that, I just wanted to give you a couple minutes of context in terms of the why and where this fits in and why we wanted to, A, help sponsor this from the Special Ed Division, and also why MTSS and UDL. And I know many of you probably know your whys in your own schools and districts and county offices and charter schools. But in general, we are at a really exciting time in special education and have some really high hopes and expectations for our students with disabilities. And the light is never going to be shining more bright than it is now with our new accountability system and dashboard. And so as practitioners, you are going to be helping be responsible for the how in how we deliver extremely accessible mathematics to our students. And so I just wanted to tell you briefly at the department some of the conversations that are happening and what we're mapping to. And so as we partner with our other state agencies, the Department of Rehabilitation and Employment Development Department, we're mapping to job readiness for all students. And so that may mean college, that may mean career technical education, that may mean something just out of high school, but we're mapping to job. And so we all know that in order to map to job for every and each student in California, that means that we have to prepare them. And so there are no longer those students that we are not preparing in our fundamentals. That's every student. So I just wanted to give you just a little bit of a basis. Number one, the how is partly through that accessible, universally designed curriculum that you all, I know, are going to go out to schools and continue to do your good work in. And I know that's what Kristin is here to talk to you about today. But I also wanted to talk to you about the expectation as a general ed teacher on what we expect for all of our students, and that is access to their grade level standards. And I know, yes, and in the past, we have not given each of our students in California access to their grade level standards, and many of us know that our students with more significant disabilities and even moderate disabilities that are behind because they have developmental disabilities have not had access to the grade level standards every year. The intention and the law, both federal law and state law, supports that we give every single student access to the grade level standards in every grade. And I know that's not easy, but what you all can do with your special education counterparts is making those lesson plans, thinking of teaching to the edges in those lesson plans for your most challenged student and your most gifted student will allow our special educators to come in and fully assist and support you in a much deeper way. So I hope you will consider that as you are moving forward in your work. And like I said, I know so many of you already do this in your work, but in terms of from a support perspective from the general ed teacher, we're asking you to really help with those universally designed lessons so that special educators can really come in and specialize and work with your individual students. Finally, it is my great pleasure to introduce Kristin, and she comes to us with an incredible background in early childhood. In her own LEA, she really was one of those forces that helped her district have universal preschool in their district and universal inclusive preschool for all their students. That is the dream in California, to one day have that. And so it is with great pleasure that I welcome Kristin, and thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
All right, good afternoon. Is everybody ready for kind of round two before lunch? Yeah, all right. Well, first I want to say thank you so much for having me today. I think our greatest resources are time and people. And so being here together and spending our time together and giving me a chance to talk about equity and access is a gift. So thank you. Looking up here at the presentation, I just want to note really quickly on your registration or with the flyer that went with today, there should be links to this presentation as well as a Padlet of resources and a little link to Kahoot that we're going to do in just a bit. So any of this information that you're interested in seeing again or downloading, you'll have access to that as well, okay? So looking up here at the first slide there, that's me because I have a secret desire to be a next Food Network star. So once this career has finished, I'm going to go out and beat Bobby Flay. So here, any Food Network fans here? All right. Give it up for Food Network. All right. Fantastic. So in my current position, I like to think of myself as a change agent. I am here to support districts throughout California through systems change to include students with and without disabilities in the least restrictive environment. So that's a big job, and I don't do it alone. It feels sometimes like we're working in isolation, but it's great to get together in forums like this and realize that you have a shared vision, and my vision is for all kids. So that's a little silhouette that my oldest son picked out for me because he said that's what I look like in a pantsuit. So better than the Alfred Hitchcock silhouette that he saw when he did a Google search. So if you guys are familiar with TED Talks, presenters have about 18 minutes to wow you, to bring you information, to hook you, to get you engaged. And today I have 60 minutes to do that. So my purpose today is really to give you some information and get you to chew on a few ideas, and hopefully you'll consider those ideas worth spreading. So this is your 60-minute TED Talk. So here's our menu for equity and access, if you can see this visual. We're going to start with an overview of MTSS and implementation science. We're going to move on to universal design for learning as a framework, a curricular framework. And the sweet spot, we always like dessert, are those online resources. So although we only have 60 minutes, there's so much information that I could share with you and others in the field could share with you on these two topics. So I really hope that at the end of the day, you take some time to go back and look at those resources and figure out how to move forward from here. And the main ingredient, building capacity, focusing on sustainability within a multi-tiered system of support. Sound good? All right, so bon appetit, getting you guys ready for lunch. So for those of you who like key terms, what I really need to get out of this presentation, because there's a lot of information that we're hearing today, right? It's really hard to digest. And so I just gave you a quick list of some of these key terms about MTSS and about UDL. But what I really want you to take away from this most of all is that it's about all students. And it's about relationships. Everything we do. And what I often tell my colleagues in different districts I work in, I say, if we're not talking about kids, we're having the wrong conversation. If we're not building relationships, positive relationships to benefit kids, we're having the wrong conversation, right? Bless you. So why the recipe theme? Is this whole MTSS and UDL thing, are those just other packaged ideas? Is this just the next shiny object that we're fixated on? And I would say absolutely not. Some of my colleagues would argue that MTSS and UDL are not recipes because it's not a specified measure of this and that makes it successful. I look at it from a lens of we are trying to make a well-balanced meal to serve to our diverse learners, right? And when you think about cooking for your friends or family, you're not going to cook something brand new for the first time for a group of 15, right? You're going to give them something that you've tried over and over, and you've tested on multiple guinea pigs, and you've changed it based on need, right? Taste and need. So we're trying to serve up the best meal for our kids, knowing that they're such varied and diverse learners. What did you say? And it is good when the guinea pig lives, yes. So I promise you will all survive this presentation. So Kahoot, anybody familiar with Kahoot? Yes? So this is where, only a couple hands. So this is fantastic. This is an opportunity for us to bring in our virtual audience as well as our in-person audience. And how many times do you guys get permission to pull out your iPhones during a presentation? Fantastic, you guys get to do it today. So please pull out your iPhones, your iPads, whatever device you might have to link to the internet. I understand that the internet is public, and for those of you in the virtual world, it's whatever you're accessing at this time. And I want you to just type into your address bar kahoot.it. Kahoot.it. I'm going to give you guys a second to do that before I pull mine up. Because once that comes up, you guys should see a screen that says enter your game pin. Kind of like Sue said before, when you get there, just give me a little thumbs up. You guys are good? Okay, so I'm going to turn mine on. Okay, so this is Kahoot. And Kahoot is a way to engage your students, doesn't matter what grade level. You can use it for surveys, for live polling, you can use it for quizzes. Kids can make Kahoot quizzes for each other, and I'll show you how this works. It's free. Don't we all love free in education? So the purpose of me using this are twofold. One, because I'm talking about universal design for learning, and part of that is how to engage your audience and how to provide multiple means of action and expression. How do I know what you guys can learn and do? How do I assess that? And how do you provide input? So I'm giving you choice to be able to provide input here. So what I'm gonna do is push play, and what's gonna come up is it's gonna tell you to, or it's gonna have the game pin, and you enter it on your device, and then it's gonna ask you to enter a nickname. And we're all adults here, so be very careful about what you put because it is being live streaming. So something appropriate. If you can't think of anything, just come up with your favorite color or your favorite number or whatever. Nothing personal, don't put your phone number, but just something that you can kind of identify. And it's not gonna have your name on there the whole time. So when you do the survey, nobody's gonna know it's an anonymous survey, but it's just for you to show that your device is linked, okay? Here we go. There's gonna be a series, I should point this part out. Series of 5 questions, just quick survey, just to get some background information about who's in the room and what our background knowledge is on these topics. So 5 questions, you have 20 seconds to answer each question. When you look at your device, you're gonna have a series of 4 options. They're color-coded and there's a shape that goes with it. So the questions are on the screen and you use your keypad to respond. The game pin will be up in just a sec, it'll be displayed. I just want you to know what's coming, okay? So the game pin will come up, enter the game pin, enter your nickname. This is really, really fun to do with kids of all ages. Okay, so here's your game pin, 994-3807. Same game pin for our in-person and our virtual audience. 994-3807. It'll show you how many players are logging in. So we have 10 so far. We're gonna let it keep going. We know we have a lot of folks in the virtual world, so please join in. And for those in-house, this is your chance to use your phone. Now we know who's out there. Coffee, please. I love that. As soon as that number starts to slow down, then I'll move on. People can still keep going as the players are being added. So we'll give it about 1 more minute. Guitar Goddess. Did you guys see that one? Shoe Lover. Yeah. All right. We're starting to slow down. People can still add, but in the interest of time, I will get us going. Okay, so remember, once I click start, the question will pop up. Use your device to respond. Here we go. 5 questions, are you ready? There are no right or wrong answers. My role in education is, use your keypad to respond. What is your role in education? Administrator, teacher, service provider, parent, community member. So here's who's in our audience. Primarily teachers or service providers, and next administrators. Just a few parents who are participating. Now what we don't want to forget is that some people may be sharing a device, and that's okay to do, right? Because again, there's no right or wrong answers, no competition. Here we go, next one. I have a solid understanding of MTSS and UDL. 2 seconds. Not even close, and somewhat are leaders, which is great because, again, this is an overview, so that no right or wrong answers. Hopefully you guys are going to walk away with some ideas worth spreading, right? The whole TED purpose. Here we go. My organization is at this level of implementation of MTSS and UDL. Exploration. All right, we're going to talk about implementation stages, and that's the very first one. Is it okay to be there? Yes, absolutely. Is it okay if we've already gotten to partial implementation to go back to exploration? Right, we'll talk about that in a little bit too. All right, excellent. You guys hanging in? Got the hang of it? All right. Systematic and systemic change is challenging and exciting. Isn't that a weird place to be? Right? This is really challenging but exciting. That means we have a lot of growth mindset going on in here, right? We're ready? We're ready for that next step. All right, last question. This is the #1 must-have through change. The #1 must-have. Communication, growth mindset, a few about active and effective leadership. So a little bit of both, or a little bit of all four, right? Hard to pick just one? Yeah. Would anybody agree that you need all of those? Right? It is hard to pick #1. But maybe you're in an organization where everybody already has a growth mindset, right? Maybe you just have some issues with data, however you like to pronounce it. I'm a speech therapist by trade, so semantics. So how does this make people feel? Change. You feel prepared? You talked about excited, challenged. Is it kind of a scary thing sometimes? Yeah. Because we need to know that we have the resources and the administrative support and the flexibility, and that we're all sharing the same vision for our kids, right? And then it feels a little safer. So what did you guys think about this activity in general? Did you like Kahoot? Anybody interested in using that with your students? Or even at staff meetings, right? Yeah, it's great. So if you go to Create Kahoot or Get Kahoot, you can find it. It's fantastic. All right, so moving on with our presentation. Thank you for that background information. It lets me know where you guys are coming from as a presenter, and who's in our virtual audience and who's here in our room with us today. So I'd like to have a shared definition of what equity is, or at least a foundation, kind of a baseline to start from, even though we all might have our own definitions. So the National Equity Project says that educational equity means that each child receives what he or she needs to develop to his or her full academic and social potential. So I emphasize academic and social. Which one do we often get stuck at, or stuck in? Education, right? I'm seeing everybody mouth academic, right? We can't forget we're looking at the whole child. We are addressing the needs of the whole child in everything we do, whether it's math or science or reading or recess or lunch. Whatever part of their day or activity they're in, we're constantly thinking of the whole child. So here's a longer definition. I know the faux pas to put too much typing up on the slides for you, so I wanted to just emphasize a couple of the words here. This is CDE's definition of multi-tiered system of supports, and the purple arrow is pointing to noticing that the word is singular. You'll often hear people say multi-tiered systems of support, and what we're trying to move away from is people thinking that it's just an umbrella of a bunch of things underneath it, and that's a series of systems that are all supportive. What multi-tiered system of support is about aligning initiatives and resources, integrating comprehensive frameworks for academic, behavioral, and social learning for all students. And notice how I highlighted all students twice. That's my soapbox if you don't know. All kids. All right. So here's a kind of a conceptual framework of what that might mean. So MTSS, bringing together both response to instruction and intervention and positive behavior intervention and supports. So looking at that academic piece and the social emotional behavior piece, right? And integrating our systems to serve the whole child. And throughout this, we're looking at universal screening for all kids, data-driven decision-making, problem-solving teams, the focus on content standards, of course, and the continuous improvement process. And throughout this, we're talking about communication and relationships and sharing of information. And I can't say it enough, no totem poles. I'll show you a visual of that later. No totem pole thinking, that you don't have a voice in that decision making and that problem solving and that the data review and the analysis and using that to inform your instruction. Everybody has a piece in their leadership teams at all levels. That's really important to know. So here's another conceptual framework. This is out of U.S. Department of Ed, just kind of adapted model. You'll see other models of MTSS where it'll have it sectioned off in 3 tiers, much like the RTI model. The reason I like this so much is because, note at the bottom, students may receive services in all areas of the pyramid at any one time. So it doesn't mean here's the cut point that you're in tier 3. Here's the cut point that you're in tier 2. You can be receiving supports fluidly throughout this system. So you're going to have specially designed instruction, and of course there's best first instruction here, core instruction for all. That's about your 80% of your students. Kind of in that middle area, about 15%, and that top percent, about 5. That doesn't mean that the top tier is only for students with disabilities. That's a big misnomer. You can receive intensive individual instruction without having an IEP. Agreed? Yes, because they're all what first? Kids are all general education first. Sometimes we forget that. So throughout this specially designed instruction, we have universal design for learning. That's what ties in these 2 topics today, is because they're so interrelated. So UDL is the curricular framework within an integrated system of supports of evidence-based best practices, what we know is good for kids, within good systems that are supporting those students. So what I want to show you right now is a video. I hope it plays for us. I think it will. May have to modify some sound a little bit here, but this is a video that was created by the Orange County Department of Education. If you guys aren't familiar with the SUMS initiative, Scaling Up Multi-Tiered System of Supports, it's a huge initiative in California right now, a collaboration between the Orange County Department of Ed, Butte County, Swift Schools, and California Department of Ed. And they're regionalizing supports to help districts create MTSS in their area so that we can go statewide. So this is a great video, and part of what UDL is multiple means of representation. So everything I just talked about with MTSS, I'm going to show you in a video. So maybe you're tired of hearing everybody present and you need to see a little video. So kind of break it up just like we would in our lessons. So here we go. It's about 4 minutes. Just talk amongst yourselves. I'm going to try to navigate the system here and cheat it a bit, and I'm going to go ahead and play it straight from the internet, because you can find this video online as well. Look at that. Oh, it's not going to let us. It needs authentication. Sorry guys, hang in there, especially our virtual folks who are probably over it by now. So it's not going to play for us, but again, it's just a 4-minute video, so we'd probably spend more time trying to get it up than it's the actual playing time. But you guys can go to the Orange County Department of Ed website and see this video that really just gives a quick rundown of what MTSS is. Just again, another way to frame it, another way to get a good understanding. Okay, so moving on. So where do we begin? So there's this MTSS thing. We're supposed to align our resources. We're supposed to align our leadership teams and the best supports for our kids. How do we even do that when we feel like we're working in silos, right? Even in your own classrooms, if you have a classroom, you go inside, you shut the door. Sometimes you don't even know what the teacher next door is doing, let alone the rest of your grade level or your school site or your feeder schools. So how do we align those systems when we're in silos, even just in such close proximity to each other? And I will tell you, it's not easy. It takes work. So the biggest thing is just taking a step forward. Having vision is being in a better place than we are today, right? So taking the step forward, and this is something to consider first. Your vision, your mission, your culture, and your climate. What are your policies and behaviors reflective of? Are they reflective of those visions and those missions? Are you talking about being an inclusive site, but yet at the same time all of your students are in other classrooms separated? Are you talking about how you have great communication in your organization, but you're never part of any of those discussions? What is your collective vision for your students in your organization? And that's where you're going to start. If you don't have a vision, you don't have a mission, and your culture and your climate are negative or non-inclusive or non-communicative, that's probably the first place to start, right? Have that foundation under you. And Kristin Wright alluded to this in talking about the why. If you know the work of Simon Sinek, he talks about the golden circle. I hear yes. So Simon's golden circle. And he talks about everybody knows what we do, and many of us know how we do it. But do we really know why? Why are you guys here today? Are you here because you want to learn more about early math? Are you here because you wanted some professional development, to see some friends during summer? Maybe you got paid, maybe you didn't get paid. Maybe it's internal motivation, maybe it's extrinsic reward. But our why really has to be the focus of everything we do every day. And so if your why changes, then your direction changes, right? And your interventions change. So thinking about what your why is. Okay, quiz time. Back to quizzes. What's this? Car wash. Child labor. No, it's car wash. And what's different about this car is it's a rental car. Don't you wash your rental car? Why not? It's not mine. They do it. Why else? I'm having too much fun. I don't have time to wash your car. Aren't we doing this to our kids? That's not my car. That's not my kid. That's somebody else's kid. I didn't sign up to do special ed. I didn't sign up to work with EL. I didn't sign up to work with foster youth. Those are somebody else's kids. Until we realize that they're all our kids, we're never going to have integrated supports and services, and we're never going to advance, right? And get our kids ready. So my mantra is harder on us, better for them. Going through systems change, looking at things differently, digging into the data, figuring out what direction we need to go, teaming with people who sometimes you don't always see squarely with. It's hard, but it's harder on us and it's better for our kids, right? We don't want to be in that hamster wheel, constantly spinning and making no progress, right? So harder on us, better for them. The National Implementation Research Network from University of North Carolina tells us the formula for success. And they say effective innovations times effective implementation times enabling context equals socially significant outcomes. Would you agree? And what do we want? We want socially significant outcomes, right? Not always academically, as a singular form, but socially significant for our kids out in the real world once they get there. And it doesn't happen overnight. So implementation science tells us that about 2 to 4 years, and we'll see our systems that we're implementing, we'll see those outcomes that we're desiring, but it's going to take time. It's not something we can say, I went to this great training in June, and we're going to implement this August 1st. It's not how it works. Even though, isn't that how it gets thrown at you sometimes? Right? Here's this new thing. You've been gone all summer. Welcome back. Look what we get to do. So there are stages of implementation. The first stage being exploratory, and we saw from the Kahoot that that's really where a lot of people are right now, the exploration phase. And we're looking at identifying the needs of our students, examining the fit and feasibility for systems change, moving into installation and planning, assuring that there are resources, developing supports, moving forward with getting started and initiating the practice and using data. Constantly looking at our data. Are we achieving the outcomes that we set? Is our data reflective of what we're doing in the classroom? And finally, just getting better, right? Cycles of we just want to get better, improvement cycles. So here's another kind of conceptual framework that I'll kind of skip through, but just show you about the drivers. So we have the stages of implementation, we have the drivers of implementation. And some of this starts to get muddy. It is deep for just an overview, but I just wanted to draw your attention to this. In terms of different drivers, so competency drivers, we need to look at coaching and training and selection of folks who are ready to take this journey in building MTSS. We want to have organizational drivers and system interventions and facilitative administration, decision support data systems, and leadership drivers, the technical side, the adaptive side. So all of these drivers, think of this as these are the engines that are flying the plane while you're building it. So you have to have these drivers in place and everybody on board with that shared vision and mission in order to integrate those resources and supports for kids. So the improvement cycle, you guys have probably seen this, but plan, do, study, act, plan, do, study, act, plan, do, study, act, over and over and over. Just because you build something and you roll it out with a nice red bow and say, here we go, we're ready for MTSS, let's see how it works. We'll check back in about 6 months. No, we constantly have to be committed to reviewing our work and is what we're doing working and benefiting kids, going back to our why. Right? Why are we here? Support our kids. So plan, do, study, act. So going back again to, this is hard work, and there are leaders at every level. And we need communication throughout the system and relationships. Right? And that growth mindset that we're not going to always get it right the first time, and that's okay. We're going to try it to do what's best for kids, and we may mess up. We may not implement a system or a support the way that we initially intended, but it's okay to go back and be okay with that. We might mess up the first time, or the second time, or the third time, but we're working on it together because we're looking for those results going back to our why. And there's no totem pole. Again, leadership at every level. So don't feel like because you were a teacher of 4-year-olds that you don't have an impact on what that district or what that organization is doing for kids as they get older. I'm just a preschool teacher. There's none of that. I'm just a this, I'm just a that. Everybody has value. You have years of experience and education and understanding of working with kids. Bring that information to the table and help us change systems to support kids. Always going back to the why. Right? Always thinking about your why. Okay, breathe. That's a lot, right? Any question about MTSS overview before we move into UDL? And I don't want to make those two, opposed. They are infused, but I just want to kind of break up the chunks or break up the concepts into chunks to make it more easy to digest going with the recipe theme. Any questions about that, virtually or in person? No? You guys hanging in? All right. So moving into UDL, Universal Design for Learning. What is UDL? So I noticed some people didn't really feel comfortable with the background information, so I'll give you some quick definitions, again, shared definitions. It's a framework for guiding educational practice. It looks at providing flexibility in the ways that information is presented, the way students respond, the way they're engaged. It's breaking down barriers for students. And we're not just talking about students with disabilities. We're talking about all students, because all students have barriers to learning in some capacity, right? So breaking down barriers. But why UDL? Where did UDL come from? Well, it started with architectural design. So initially looking at how to build plans that would suit everyone so that they all have access and choices. So that rolls right into learning. We want to provide our kids with access and choices so that everyone can benefit. You're seeing the theme, right? Access, choices, all kids. So here's what it looks like in architecture. So somebody tell me what you see. What do you see? How do you get to the top? Oh, very good. So right over here.
Stairs and ramps.
Why would they have both?
There's more than one way to get to the top. Somebody might need assistance and the stairs might be too difficult to navigate for them.
That's right. So there's a cartoon, if you guys have seen it or Google it, and it has a similar picture, but it's a cartoon and it's covered in snow. and there's a gentleman who is scraping the snow off the stairs so that the students can get to school. You guys seen this? So he's scraping the stairs, and in the cartoon, there's a little boy in a wheelchair, and he says, "Excuse me, can you scrape the ramp?" And he says, "When I'm done scraping the stairs, I'll scrape the ramp." And the little boy says, "But if you scrape the ramp, we can all get up." Right? I'm sure he said it nicely too. So point being, instead of retrofitting buildings and designs to make them ADA compliant, build it right the first time. And that applies to learning and our lesson plans. Build it right the first time to meet the needs of multiple learners, and we won't have to keep retrofitting. So here's my question at the top if you can't read that either online or in person. Has this been driving our assessments, curriculum, and instruction, the average learner? Yeah, right? Our curriculum is based around average. We're looking for average scores. What's the average student doing in your class? What are your averages? And that's a myth. There really is no average. What we're talking about is teaching to the margins. So as Kristin mentioned earlier, the other Kristin, our students who are very high performing, or maybe our gifted students, if you would call them that, down to our students who are struggling. Right? We're looking at how do we support all of the kids. And some people use the bowling theme. When you're bowling and you're always trying to hit the center pin, it's harder to knock them all down. And what's the strategy? You go for the margins. You throw that ball in the margins, you're going to knock down all those pins. Think about that one for a minute. That's mind blowing. All right. Everybody's thinking about their game now. They're like, ooh, I should try that. So the myth of average, and if I had 17, 18 minutes, I would show you the Ted Rose video. He's from Harvard University and talks about the myth of average. It's a fantastic video, and it's on the Padlet. So if you guys have an opportunity to watch that, it would be great. He talks about the myth of average and design for the mythical middle person. Todd Rose from Harvard. He has a TED Talk called The Myth of Average. It's great. And he's talking about how just like we're different in how we present physically, we're different in our learning profile. So if we're shooting for the middle, we're missing all the good stuff up and down that profile. And I would add this to the myths. I would add that there's a myth of average, but there's also the myth that kids come to school with a clean slate. Right? You think, phew, I made it through the school year. Kids are going to show up in August, and they're going to be so fresh and ready. And if they learned math the wrong way last year, I'm going to teach them right this year. Right? They came to us with all of this background knowledge, not only educational background knowledge, but cultural and social. Right? Our kids are full of experience before they get to us. So if we think they're all going to learn the same way because they all showed up on our doorstep or our classroom door looking relatively the same height, then we're fooling ourselves, right? So we really have to look at and explore and value and engage in our students' funds of knowledge, their social and cultural competence, and cultural capital and exchange that they have and they bring to school and they share or don't have the opportunity to share with others because of whatever barriers we've put up for our kids. So they're definitely not coming to us with clean slates. And somebody said, I don't want to misquote, but somebody said, you know, kids are coming how they are. The parents are sending what they have. They're not keeping the good ones home. Right? This is who they have. And take them as they are for everything amazing that they bring to us. All right, so looking at UDL, it's based in brain research, looking at 3 networks of the brain. The affective network, or the why of learning, the recognition network, or the what of learning, and the strategic network, the how of learning. So we've learned so much more about brain research and how we need to tap into these 3 different networks to really be able to understand what our kids can learn, know, and do. So here's another way to look at it. And as I mentioned, this information is all on the Padlet. If you go to CAST.org, which stands for Center for Applied Special Technology in Boston, they have this UDL guideline posted as well as udlcenter.org. And what's great about this and the guidelines is it's interactive. So you can click on the principles and the guidelines, and it'll give you ideas for these different networks to either have extension or intervention in each of these areas and tools for developing lessons. So the purpose being we're looking at engagement. How do you get your kids actively engaged in, well, first of all, getting to school, right? But once they're in school, how do you keep them engaged in those lessons? Providing multiple means of representation and multiple means of action expression. So do kids always have to use Unifix cubes? Do they always have to count their collections in linear order? Or are you giving them options? And that's what I've loved about today. So everybody's talking about the same thing, right? Choice and multiple means of representation and action expression. So you might look at these and say, you know, I do that in my classroom. My kids are engaged. I do provide multiple means of representation. Of course I use manipulatives. Of course I let them, you know, use their whiteboards or whatever it might be. But think about the couple of kids who you wish you could have done more with, reached further, deeper, engaged more. There's always, I don't care if you're teacher of the year, you're going to find a couple kids you wish you could have reached a little bit differently. And that's what UDL does. So back to this kind of cooking or recipe theme, it's not throwing out the baby with the bathwater and saying redo all your lesson plans because they're not working for kids. It's enhancing what you already have. How do you make those lessons designed to meet multiple and varied learners, right? So you don't need to start over. But looking at the guidelines, you might think, you know, maybe I do need to look at more options for action expression. Maybe I feel like math is so concrete, there's only one way to express it. But as we've seen this morning, that's not the case, right? There's another way to look at the guidelines in bands. So the bottom band being accessibility. So if you're having a hard time just even having the kids access the information, start at the bottom. Making information meaningful, kind of in that middle band. And then creating or developing independent self-directed learners. Isn't that what we want them to be, right? Do you guys ever use that term, ask three before me? Maybe not with your preschoolers, but yeah, yes. Ask three before me, because you're trying to get the kids to learn from each other and be independent instead of thinking that you're the sole provider of information. All right, so in curricular planning, when we're looking at designing lessons, what the creators of UEL have talked about, and the brain research has showed us that there's kind of a method, or there really is a method to developing these lessons, starting with your goals. What are your goals? What do you want your kids to learn and do and know with that lesson? And this is each lesson. What's the goal? How are you going to assess it? What methods are you going to use for instruction? And then what materials? Where do we often start, especially with our little ones? Materials, right? We've got these cute activities. I can't wait to use this. It's going to be great. The kids are going to create this thing and take it home to their parents, and I'm going to be amazing. And they're going to have so much fun. But what's the point? Right? We can have every crafty activity in the class, and the kids are having fun, but we want to make sure there's a learning goal attached. Right? Yes. So Dr. Patty Ralabate, who's on the East Coast, sent me one of her books. And I do not get royalties from posting this, by the way. I have never even met her in person, but she sent me this book because she's going to present for us at the state conference in October. And she knows I'm a big UDL fan, and I asked her to present on UDL, and she's coming out, and it's going to be great. So she sent me this book. And I love sharing resources with teachers that you can use right away, and that's what this is. This book is fantastic. It is your UDL lesson planner, a step-by-step guide for teaching all learners. So not only is it an easy read, has sample lessons, talks about the targets, talks about the different stages of implementing UDL, but it has videos, 7 videos that go with it. And I have one connected, but I won't show it to you today just because in the interest of our tech. So I encourage you, though, that when you're chewing on these different concepts and you're thinking about MTSS and you're thinking about UDL and you want more information, but sometimes Google seems so overwhelming, there's so much information out there, this is one of those resources that I recommend, because I really, from multiple lenses, could understand UDL very clearly when I read something like this, and as an educator, could implement concepts of UDL right away. So, good one. So what are your goals? Let's talk about what our goals are, because that's where we start with curricular planning, right? What are your goals? All right, it's quiz time again. So here's an activity or project, and it says, what's the goal, how do you know, and what grade would you give this project? What's the goal, how do you know, what grade would you give it? What's the goal? Create something, right? Well, first, what do you see? Especially for our virtual folks who might not be able to see the screen very well, what do you see? Eggshells, right? Colorful eggshells. There looks like there's some glitter on there. Paint, paper. So what might this be? A collage? 3D collage? Maybe there's some math involved, right? What if I said you were supposed to, in a broken Easter egg, right? What if I said that the task was to create a centerpiece for the family gathering in springtime? What grade would you give it? A plus. Who said A plus? Yes, especially if you're a mom, right? Yeah, you're like, my child brought this home to me. This is amazing, right? Everything my child does is amazing. You get an A plus. So UDL talks about clearly defined goals but flexible means. Maybe you give the kids these whole eggs and you give them a variety of media and you say create something within this 4x4 frame and one child chooses to drop it. Is that okay? Yeah, met the goal. Flexible means to get there, right? Maybe one student wanted to use finger paints. Maybe one wanted to use a brush. Maybe one wanted to use splatter. Maybe kids would really prefer to do a group project because they're going to be spending the night at somebody else's house and they can't take the project, whatever it is. But clearly defined goal, flexible means. Is that okay? Yes, we can meet the same goal. I think being flexible is really difficult in education. Do you think? Yes. Oftentimes we're saying, this is the way I've done it for years. I've had the same lesson and it's worked well and my kids are doing great. Look at my outcomes. And we have a hard time flexing from that. We have a hard time thinking that there might be something we can tweak and offer more options for choice and representation and engagement. So focus on the purpose and not the activities, right? So we talked about before, sometimes we go straight to materials and these great activities that we want to create for kids, but focus on the purpose. And when you're writing goals, being specific, measurable, attainable, results-oriented, and time-bound. You guys know about SMART goals, right? So we know about it, but we don't always use it, right? Sometimes we're not writing things that are measurable. We just say, well, they completed the task, so they met the goal. But really, what was the purpose, right? And going back, and that's not taking the fun out of learning at all, because the kids are having fun. It's the work on the adults, right? What do we want our kids to be able to learn, know, and do? And how are we going to know that they got there? So another thing that Dr. Ralabate has in the book that I loved and got permission to literally take a screenshot and put it up here, flexible versus constricted verbs. So she talks about when you're writing goals, are constricted verbs like add, copy, graph. That sets a limit on how kids are showing us what they learn, know, and can do, right? Whereas if we provide some flexible verbs, analyze, apply, predict, compare, that gives some more option, some more flexibility in there. So just those semantics will help us determine if our kids are learning and they know and then can do what we are looking for, what we expect. So let's talk about variability, all right? Lunch is almost here. This fits in nicely. So my goal is, for this activity in my brain, that I want to host a Sunday brunch. And I'm going to bring 15 of my closest friends. And my goal is to hold the brunch, only go to the grocery store once, have enough time to socialize with my friends, and I don't really know how to make much, so I'm just going to make one thing. I'm going to make Mexican lasagna. Okay, so thinking of my goals, grocery store once, social with friends, 15 of them, only know how to make one thing. Who's included and who's excluded? Sure. Vegetarians, gluten, dairy, somebody on, pretty much anybody on a diet, right? Pretty much anyone on a diet. There might be a little meat in there, might be a little spicy, right? So, too hot, that's right. My kids would never eat that. Are you kidding me? They would never eat that. So what happens when I have brunch for 15 friends? My kids can't even enjoy, right? Because they wouldn't eat that. Because I didn't plan for the variability of not only my guests, but my own kids. So think about how you can still meet your goal, clear goal, flexible means. Plan for variability. So this is a pizza station, all right? Now you're thinking, oh, what about gluten? You know they make gluten-free flour. What about those people watching their carbs? Maybe they just pick the toppings, because you know you all have friends, if you don't do it yourself, that has a little pile of protein, right? And no carbs. So the point being, looking back at your goals. Did I go to the grocery store once? Yes. Yes. Socially, could people engage because they're all making their own, right? I didn't even have to cook, so that cut down on that time, right? And I provided some options for my guests because they're such varied eaters. So will this still reach every single child? Maybe not, or every single guest, but I'm getting there, right? I'm thinking more flexibly because sometimes people say if it's predictable, it's preventable. So if I know my kids aren't going to eat that, why am I serving it? Just to make them sit down and eat it? That's no fun. You guys know that game, right? So plan for variability. Have you guys seen these photos before? Talking about offering the same task to 3 learners, and the task if I'm remembering the study right, was for 3 individuals just to lay there and do this. Why did their brains light up so differently? Mm-hmm. All right. So auditory, maybe auditory impacting. Mm-hmm. Maybe some kinesthetic, some motor, right? For this bottom photo was a musician tapping to their own beat, right? Didn't tell me how I have to tap, just that I have to tap, laying there quietly. So point being that variability is the rule, not the exception. Don't assume that if you build this lesson, it's only going to meet 1 or 2 learners. It's really going to meet a variety of learners because remember, there's no average. Myth of the average. So let's talk about assessment. Remember your goals. What do you want your students to be able to know, learn, and do? And you guys know formative versus summative, right? Oftentimes we just give summative. It's just what did they do at the end? What did they do at the end of the activity? What did they do at the end of the week? What did they do at progress reporting time? But don't forget that formative all along the way, that you can be taking data without giving a formal assessment, right? So are we determining what our students can learn, know, and do ongoing basis? Or are we going, oh, well, that lesson, that unit I went over for the last 3 weeks was terrible. Well, we just wasted the last 3 weeks, right? So being flexible and being able to change and adapt to your varied learners throughout the process, not just at the end. Let's talk context. Change the environment, not the student. All right, so let's look at the classroom on the left versus the classroom on the right. Okay, so the classroom on the left, death rows facing forward. Classroom on the right, kids turn toward each other, technology, smiling. Which class would you rather be in? Right? They didn't even show up in class on the left. So I would say for sure the classroom on the right. So think about your environment. Are you providing opportunities for engagement just with your physical environment, right? Or are you having your kids all face forward because you're the person in charge at the front of the class and you're not getting close to your students in proximity? We do a better job of this, I think, in early ed than sometimes as we get older, as the students get older, I should say. And we just want them all facing forward and listening to me and take notes and move on to your next class, right? So you talked about earlier, what happened? What happened at 3rd and 4th grade? Well, what's happening is we're turning our kids into little listen to me robots, right? Because the curriculum guide is telling me that I have to go much faster and you're falling behind and I got to keep going. Right? And I was telling a story to one of my partners over here about my 3rd grader who is a very bright young boy, but was really distraught about math. 3rd grade, remember, this is the golden year. 3rd grade, and I said, what's going on? I said, I haven't passed my 6s. His multiplication chart. Haven't passed my 6s. And he was kicking himself about not passing 6s. And I said, you know what, we'll keep practicing. Don't worry about it. It's fine. No, I don't get to listen to the rest of the activities with the other kids because I'm practicing my 6s. So here he is off to the side of the room. And this is his mind. This may not be happening. There could be an intervention that's going on with a group of kids. So I'm not saying this is what's happening. This is how he's perceiving it, right? And our perceptions are our reality. And his perception is, until he masters his 6s, he's not good enough to engage in the rest of mathematical learning. Isn't that a sad message we're sending kids? So again, might not be happening, fantastic teacher, but that's his perception. So we have to break those down. Those are our own self-imposed barriers to learning, right? When our kids are feeling that way about learning and they just say, forget it. I don't want to know anything more about math because 6's multiplication tables are my enemy. So UDL talks about essential for some but usable by all. Closed captioning. Who was it created for? Hearing impaired, right? Who else uses it? Did you say I do? Yes, just like I do. I can't hear it. Yeah, starting to lose it, right? Might not be a diagnosis of a hearing impairment, but I'm not really hearing that. Very good. Teaching her son how to read. Was closed captioning created for her or her son? No. Essential for some, usable by all. How about students or individuals learning another language or learning English, right? How about my husband who likes to watch the war movies at 11 o'clock at night? He needs to turn that on, right? Because it keeps me up at night. So essential for some, usable by all. So that's what we're talking about in building our lessons. My poor husband, I just outed him. All right, so accommodations versus modifications. I put this emoji up here because some people really struggle with this. Would you guys agree? What's the difference between accommodation and a modification? And I can't do either one unless you have an IEP and somebody tells me that I have to do it for this particular student. False, right? We can accommodate the heck out of whatever we want. Modifying is a different thing. So I want to try to break it down a little bit for you, make a little bit more sense. And the reason why I bring this up, one is because it's so confusing in education, but two, because accommodations provide access. And that's what we want our kids to be able to do, right? We're not making it easier for kids. We're not giving them a crutch. We're tapping into that varied learner, right, and providing access. So let's look at it this way. Accommodations level the playing field. Access. Level the playing field. Accommodations change the field you're playing on. Okay? Modification. Is that what I said? Sorry. I'm hungry too. Modifications. So access versus changing the whole field. Accommodations change the how of learning. Modifications change the what of learning. And I just threw in here your why never changes, right? So thinking about accommodations, thinking about extra time to complete an activity, thinking about even a one-on-one paraprofessional who's working with students in your classroom. As long as they're not modifying the work, they're helping the student access the information. Providing manipulatives, providing a safe place in the quiet, calm down section of your classroom. Those are all accommodations. Those aren't modifications. When we start changing the curriculum in terms of asking our students to do less, I'm going to take your, you had 10 problems you were going to do, now I'm going to cut it in half, now you only have to do 5. Some people would say that's an accommodation because, they have a hard time focusing. It's really a modification because you've changed the standard for that student. So thinking about if the goal, which I don't know why it would be that they must complete 10, there's no flexibility, but they must complete 10, how about give them extra time? How about let them pick which ones they do first? Something like that. So being flexible within those constricted means, right? But really being cognizant of the fact that we can accommodate for kids. Modification is, obviously needs to be individualized for those students and does change the what of learning. But oftentimes I'll walk into classrooms and I'll see kids, using the move and sit cushions or the fidgets or the TheraBand, something like that, an accommodation in the classroom. And other kids are saying, well, why can't I use that? Well, no, that's for him. He's special. But if you had a move and sit cushion or some TheraBand or fidget toys for all the kids, saying, hey, here's, in general, everybody can access this. If you need to take a break, here's the break area for everybody, not just little Johnny who has a meltdown, right? Making it open for everyone. So accommodations could be provided for all. So let's talk about what UDL looks like. I would have, there's a video, but we're going to skip it. So in or on the Padlet are the guidelines, and they're broken down again into engagement, multiple means of representation, and action and expression. So I encourage you to look at this template, and as you're working either within your classroom or with your teams at the same grade level or same site, same organization, even as parents working with your teachers, kind of take notes as you're working in the classroom or observing. What observations can you make about multiple means of representation? Especially in math, we see it a lot, right? We see manipulatives, we see smart boards, we see the cubes, we see the number lines, we see the cards. We see a lot of engagement with manipulatives, right? Sometimes it's harder to see that in reading, but in math, take a look, since this is a math focus, take a look at what opportunities we have for engagement, multiple means of representation, and action and expression. And you can kind of fill it in. Even as you think about your own lessons or your own activities, go back and say, you know what, I feel like I didn't provide enough opportunities for this or this or that. And I don't want to present that it's a checklist. UDL is not a checklist. It's a framework, right? But we are still trying to fill in the gaps. What are we missing that we're not reaching all learners? So how can we do things a little bit differently, add some flavor to that meal that we've already prepared? So this video is posted on the Padlet. This is the one I was going to show you. Yeah, I can try it. Let me try. Let's see if our sound works this time. There's no sound at the beginning on purpose. Yeah, it's not okay. Oh. Yay!
Cognitive neuroscience has shown us that there really isn't an average student anywhere, and that's why it's an illusion. particularly focused on making sure that we get those students who have been marginalized, for whom that designing for the average student has never worked well. And that certainly means students who have been struggling, students for whom English is not their first language, students with disabilities. They've been typically marginalized by this illusory average. Secondly, though, students at the other level, students who are called gifted and talented, are also students who've been underserved by this mainstream curriculum. They haven't been challenged. They're bored. They're underserved as well. EPL is a framework based in cognitive neuroscience for designing learning experiences that work across a wide spectrum of learning. Main purpose is to make sure that everybody is a successful learner and reaches what we call being an expert learner. That is, they know a lot, they know how to do a lot, and they love learning and want to do it more. The key to universal design for learning is that we're designing learning experiences which from the beginning are designed to be universal and to make sure everybody learns. And that design is primarily based on the power to be very flexible in allowing choices, in allowing different paths, in allowing for things to be presented in different ways so that we reach those other two things, universal and everybody learns. The three principles of universal design come from careful analysis of what learning really is. In many classrooms, the focus is on an illusory average.
Okay, so what did you guys see? We were talking about using that blank sheet to kind of fill in what you see. What did you guys see in that video? Any examples of engagement, action representation, action expression, multiple means of representation? Anybody notice anything?
Unifix cubes, and then there were also drawings on some of the papers.
So drawings, Unifix cubes as manipulatives.
It looked like some teacher scaffolding, looked like we're helping some individualized learning, and then there's peers helping peers as well, so a peer helping his peer.
Very good observation. Anything else? Did you guys notice the smart board in there? Do you guys use smart boards in early ed? Yeah. One of the things that I know at least CAST wants to really message out, and that is you don't have to have this high-tech technology to implement UDL. It helps. It's great. We all love it. But you don't have to have the latest and greatest thing. You don't say, well, I can't do UDL because we don't have a smart board. We don't have iPads. Our district doesn't provide that, or our organization doesn't have that. UDL is the framework. Remember, the materials come last, right? You're going to go goals, assessment, methods, and then materials that you need to reach your goals. Any other comments on that video? That was David Rose, by the way, from CAST. They're in Boston. All right. I'm watching our clock as well. So also on the Padlet are some just examples of lesson planning. So how to help you frame those lessons. And people write lessons in many different ways, right? Some people have it in a calendar, some people have it digitally, some people just brainstorm in a flip book. So this is just one other template to provide for you to think about those three networks of the brain and those three principles of the VDL. So that's on the Padlet if you're interested. I mentioned that whenever I see a book that I think educators can use in the classroom the next day, this is another example. This is Katie Novak, and she is an assistant superintendent in Massachusetts. And she says, when you begin UDL implementation, you need to move away from fixing kids to fixing curriculum. And this takes time and creativity. Would you guys agree? Yeah. Right? Harder on us, better for them. We need to fix our own curriculum, not fix the kids. So she has two books, technically. One is UDL Now, and then she has an updated version. I believe it has about 40 more pages in it. Again, another quick read, and it talks about a teacher's guide to applying UDL today's classroom and Monday morning sessions. And isn't that what we want? We don't want to just go to a conference or a symposium and then never be able to use it and not know the next steps. And I'm telling you, this is a great guide for your next steps to infuse UDL into your classroom. So not forgetting the framework, again, 2 concepts, but joining them together. So multi-tier system of supports, as well as UDL infused throughout those interventions. And I would be remiss without giving you guys the best, cutest video that I hope plays of little kids, right? And this goes back to our why. So I always think when I'm having a hard day or there's some red tape that gets in the way of what I want to do for kids, I go back to my why, and it makes me smile whenever I see this video. So if you haven't seen it, it's only 2 minutes, and it's also on the Padlet. You seen it?
Stop giving up. Here's the deal. I can do anything, be anything, create anything, dream anything, become anything. My dad always says, you are what you do, not what you say. Well, you grown-up saying love us, but I challenge you, please, make your actions reflect your words. And do what even you say, you don't know what the way to run. And you know, you trust me. I like my dog. I like my dog. I like my room. I like my whole house. My whole house is great. I can do anything good. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Do anything. I just want everything to be good as possible. Nothing else. You better not give up on us. No, you better not. Because, as you know, in some cases, you're all we've got. And I can be nice. I think all of us can be nice too. It's your turn. Now go up here and get it.
Come on, that's adorable. I could watch that 1,000 times over. I love it. Like minute 24 seconds makes my day, or 46 seconds. So any questions before you guys are going to be heading out to lunch? And then I'll put up the Padlet so you guys have access to that, kind of peruse through, and you can see what I'm talking about if you haven't accessed that already. Any questions about MTSS, UDL from our virtual folks or in person? Or any just comments in general? Maybe something that struck a chord with you.
Saying once, normal is a cycle on a washing machine.
That's a good one. Did everybody hear that? Normal's only a cycle on the washing machine, right? And we don't write goals that say Johnny will be normal 8 out of 10 times. Anything else that struck a chord with you? No questions. Well, that was easy.